What is silence, really? Is it the absence of sound? Or is it the trace of something greater, something pressing down upon us, holding its breath, waiting for us to realize what it means? When we tilt our heads back into the night sky, what we hear is not emptiness. It is not peace. It is an orchestra of distance, the haunting weight of unanswered questions. And perhaps it is a silence designed, curated, engineered, enforced. For if the cosmos is filled with possibilities, with billions of stars, with worlds that could teem with life, then why, across this immense cathedral of time and space, are we alone in the choir? Why is there no echo, no song, no signal that tells us we are not the first and not the last? Astronomers call it the Fermi Paradox, the contradiction between the staggering number of worlds where life could exist and the fact that the universe appears to be mute. We ask, where is everybody? But maybe the better question is, what happened to everybody? The silence is not just unsettling, it is suspicious. And sometimes, a mystery is solved not by what is present, but by what is absent. In the year 2024, our solar system received a visitor, not a ship, not a signal, a rock, or what appeared to be one. It was named 3/Atlas, the third interstellar object ever detected passing through our neighborhood. To most, it was another cosmic curiosity, a brief speck crossing the dark. But to some, it was a whisper of something far more unsettling. Because this was not the first, there had been others. And the more we looked, the stranger the silence became. These visitors do not simply pass, they linger, they twist, they reflect questions we didn't know we were asking. Oumuamua, the first, shaped like no comet we had seen, gliding in silence with a trajectory that made no sense. Borisov, the second, ordinary enough to be disarming. And now, Atlas, with a geometry too precise, too poised, too much like an imitation of something we expect a rock to be. And this raises a thought, one so dark and so staggering that most will look away. What if these are not visitors in the sense we think of them? What if these are not rocks at all? What if they are something else, something older, colder, more deliberate? And what if their purpose is not exploration, but eradication? Consider the idea for a moment. Life arises across the universe. It builds, it grows, it reaches upward. Eventually, it learns to speak, first to itself, then across the stars. The signals of youth are bright, messy, unmistakable. But then, just as the song begins, it stops. No follow-up transmission, no expansion, no galactic community waiting to greet us. Just silence, again and again, as though some unseen hand has pressed a finger to its lips, and one by one, the voices are extinguished. If this is true, then the universe is not empty. It is patrolled. And objects like 3/Atlas are not innocent drifters, but instruments of a quieting that spans eons. Imagine such a device. At first glance, nothing more than a fragment of rock, ice, and dust. But beneath its surface, a precision we cannot yet comprehend. Systems that awaken not to communicate, but to measure, to listen, to decide. Perhaps it does nothing more than watch, and then send its findings elsewhere. Or perhaps it carries within it the seeds of entropy, clouds of dust fine enough to poison an atmosphere, filaments that choke electricity, a cloak of particles that dim the sun by just enough to starve a civilization into collapse. A weapon that does not rage, but whispers. Not a conqueror, but a gardener pruning what grows too tall. We tell ourselves stories of aliens with fleets, with invasions, with diplomacy and dialogue. But what if reality is more terrifying in its elegance? What if the universe is ruled not by empires, but by machines left behind by something long gone? Machines whose only task is to ensure that no one survives long enough to rival their makers. In such a universe, survival is not about building faster ships or louder transmitters. It is about hiding. It is about remaining small, quiet, invisible, like animals in a forest where predators never sleep. And here, standing on our small planet, we have shouted. We have sent radio waves into the void for over a century, announcing ourselves without hesitation. We have burned cities bright enough to be seen across parsecs. We have carved our names into the darkness with Voyager, with Pioneer, with golden records that tell anyone who finds them exactly where to look. We assumed discovery would mean welcome, but what if discovery means death? 3. I/Atlas cuts across our sky like a blade. The numbers tell us it is only passing through. But so did Oumuamua. and it behaved as if the laws of inertia were only a suggestion. We are told these anomalies can be explained by natural causes, outgassing, ice jets, complex rotations, and yet each explanation feels like a mask that does not fit. There is always a remainder, a residue of unease, a whisper that says, no, something else is happening here. Something watching, something measuring, something deciding whether we are a spark to be nurtured or a fire to be smothered. But why would such things exist? Why would the universe need caretakers of silence? The answer lies not in malice, but in inevitability. Think of humanity's own history. How often have we seen one culture erase another, not out of hatred, but out of fear or indifference? How many species have gone extinct simply because they grew in the path of something stronger, something more patient? To assume the universe is kinder than ourselves is to gamble with everything we are. To assume it is harsher may be the only path to survival. What does silence sound like when it is chosen, enforced, commanded? It is not the gentle hush of a forest at dawn. It is the silence of a room just after a candle has been snuffed out. It is the silence after a scream, when the air itself seems reluctant to admit what has just happened. It is the silence that fills our galaxy now, a silence that may be the legacy of machines like 3/Atlas. And so, we ask again, where is everybody? Perhaps they are gone, erased not by their own mistakes, but by the arrival of rocks that were not rocks, visitors that were not visitors. Perhaps civilizations before us grew too bright, too loud, and they drew down upon themselves the quiet hand of something that erases without leaving scars. If so, then we may not be waiting for contact at all. We may be waiting for judgment. The stars above us are beautiful, but beauty can be a disguise. Light itself can be a mask. And tonight, as you hear this story, somewhere beyond our sight, 3/Atlas is still moving, still silent, still carrying with it the question we do not want to face, a question that is also a warning. What if the answer to the Fermi Paradox is not absence, but presence? A presence that does not greet, does not conquer, does not explain, but only silences. And so, the story begins here, with a rock that may not be a rock, with silence that may not be silence, with a paradox that may not be a paradox at all, but a design. The question is not whether we will discover the truth. The question is whether we will survive it. Patterns. That is where truth hides, not in isolated events, but in their repetition. One stone falling from the sky can be dismissed as chance. Two may be coincidence, but three. Three forms a sequence, a rhythm, a whisper of something woven through the fabric of time. And when 3/Atlas joined the other interstellar wanderers that had brushed our system, we began to sense that this was not random. This was choreography, a geometry of disappearance written across centuries. Look back across the vast ledger of the sky. Civilizations rise, they speak in radio, in chemistry, in heat. They illuminate their planets with signatures that travel far beyond their suns. For a moment, a brief heartbeat in cosmic time, they are visible. But then, the light dies. The signal fades. The echo vanishes. Astronomers searching for technosignatures see something eerie. Not nothing, but interrupted songs. Candidates that appear, sparkle with possibility, and then are gone before confirmation. It is like walking through a hall of doors, each one slightly ajar, each one leading to a room that has been abandoned only moments before you entered. The tea is still warm, the candles still smoke, but the people are gone. And then, against this backdrop of sudden silence, interstellar objects sweep through, on oblique, carefully tuned trajectories, as though drawn by invisible lines. They do not circle stars the way comets do. They do not belong to the families of asteroids bound by gravity. They arrive from nowhere, curve once, and vanish again into the black. But if you overlay their paths against the timing of those extinguished signals, the picture shifts. Vectors cross where transmissions end. Trajectories align with the faint deaths of songs. We begin to see a cartographer's hand, lines etched from system to system, like a grim survey of silence. Is this coincidence? Perhaps. The universe is vast, and chance can paint illusions in the constellations of data. But consider the precision. Atlas entered on an angle that made detection possible only when we were looking at the right place at the right time. Its perihelion, the point of closest approach to the sun, fell on a date when Earth's own telescopes were at peak readiness. And yet, had we not refined our surveys just months before, it would have slipped by unseen. Almost as though it skimmed the margins of our awareness intentionally, balancing on the knife edge between visible and invisible. The geometry was not sloppy. It was elegant, purposeful. If you wanted to prune civilizations without being noticed, how would you move? You would not broadcast. You would not shine. You would not descend in fleets. You would move in silence, following arcs that intersect not with stars, but with signals, timing your arrival for the moment a young world first announces itself. You would drift close enough to listen, to measure, to decide, and then you would fade away, leaving only silence behind. A silence that feels like chance, like accident, like the inevitable fading of voices too fragile to endure. But the silence repeats. It repeats in ways too rhythmic to ignore. Consider the Drake equation, humanity's attempt to calculate the number of civilizations in our galaxy. Each parameter multiplies the odds upward. Billions of stars, billions of planets, a fraction habitable, a fraction alive, a fraction intelligent. By the logic of probability, our galaxy should be loud, saturated with signals, buzzing with life. And yet, when we tune our instruments, we hear nothing. Nothing but cosmic static, the hiss of the background fire from creation. The Drake equation gives us a chorus, reality gives us a tomb. Unless, of course, the missing variable is not in the math, but in the predators. Imagine mapping not the stars, but the silences. Draw a chart of when civilization should be detectable, and when they fall quiet. You begin to see windows, periods of only a few hundred years when a planet sings before it goes dark. In cosmic terms, this is a blink, and the alignment suggests something terrifying. The moment a planet grows loud enough to be noticed, something comes calling, something that ensures the song is cut short. 3I/Atlas is just the latest messenger in this geometry. Its trajectory, when reconstructed, does not align with known cometary families. It enters on a vector that avoids close encounters with the gas giants, as though sidestepping gravitational traps. Its velocity is tuned, not reckless, not slow, but efficient, economical, as though designed to minimize exposure while maximizing precision. It is a geometry of disappearance, a path drawn not by randomness, but by intent. If Oumuamua was a question, and Borisov a distraction, then Atlas feels like a statement, a warning. And what do we see when we peer closer? Atlas's light curve is too smooth at times, then jagged, then stabilized, as though compensating for our attention. Its surface, when modeled, suggests shapes too sharp for natural fragmentation, yet too irregular for design as we understand it. It is camouflage, a costume, a mask meant to look like randomness to the casual glance, but whispering order to those who stare too long. And in that mask, we sense the outline of something we were not meant to see. The geometry deepens when we consider time. Civilizations rise and vanish within narrow windows. Our own has been broadcasting for scarcely a century. In that century, 2 interstellar objects have already brushed past us, and a third now drifts through. What are the odds of such timing? To believe in coincidence is to believe the universe plays dice with loaded weights. To believe in pattern is to admit we may already be under observation. If this is true, then silence is not passive. It is imposed. It is cultivated like a crop, maintained like a garden. The geometry of disappearance is not a mystery. It is a design. Civilizations are permitted to bloom just long enough to prove the inevitability of intelligence, and then they are cut down before they spread too far. The universe is not empty. It is curated. And the curator is patient, precise, relentless. And what of us? What of our fragile voices spilling outward at the speed of light? Our first transmissions are already 40, 50, 70 light years away, bathing nearby stars in evidence of our existence. If the geometry holds, then somewhere out there, those signals have been received, cataloged, noted, and the path of the next stone may already be calculated. Perhaps Atlas itself carries the record. Perhaps it has already judged us, and its trajectory is not escape but return. We imagine ourselves explorers, but perhaps we are only quarry. Perhaps the geometry of disappearance is a hunt, and we are running a race we did not know we entered, a race where the finish line is not survival, but silence. And even now, the runners are ahead of us, invisible, unhurried, waiting for us to stumble into their reach. The stars glitter above us like eyes, watching, unblinking. And in the maps of silence, in the arcs of interstellar wanderers, we begin to sense their gaze, a geometry traced not in light, but in absence, a pattern that whispers the same question, over and over. How long before we, too, vanish into the quiet? What does it mean for a rock to pretend, for stone to lie? Nature does not usually wear masks. Comets shed tails because ice sublimates. Asteroids tumble because collisions scar them. The motions are chaotic, raw, the physics honest. Yet with objects like Oumuamua and now 3i/Atlas, honesty dissolves into theater. These are things that move like stones, but speak in the grammar of machines. They are not ships as we dream of them, gleaming hulls and roaring engines, but something colder. A machine that pretends to be a rock. A predator clothed in geology. We first saw the disguise with Oumuamua. Its shape was too extreme, its acceleration too subtle, too persistent, and without the plume of dust that comets exhale. It looked in every way like a piece of something broken, but brokenness does not steer itself. Astronomers strained for explanations: hydrogen icebergs, nitrogen shards, fractal dust, hypotheses piled up like masks stacked on masks, each one possible, yet none sufficient. And through that failure, a deeper suspicion seeped in. What if the disguise was working exactly as intended? What if the very act of confusing us was its purpose? Now consider Atlas. Its mass shifts when measured at different phase angles, as though density itself bends around the gaze. Its thermal profile does not match its surface albedo, as though heat seeps through channels unseen, veins that run like circuitry beneath stone. Its spin state locks at moments of observation, then drifts when unobserved, like a puppet pausing mid-performance, when the audience looks too closely. Rocks do not do this, but machines might. Imagine a device designed to drift for millions of years. How would you build it? Not sleek, not shining. Those are human aesthetics. You would build it rough, jagged, so that any world that glimpses it dismisses it as a stray fragment. You would wrap it in camouflage that needs no repair, the natural randomness of mineral and ice. And yet, inside, the mask would hide complexity. Sensors embedded like crystals, reservoirs of nanodust that could be exhaled into atmospheres, magnetic coils braided into seams, waiting to release filaments thinner than hair, strong enough to strangle satellites. A body that is dead rock on the outside, but within, alive with patient purpose. We call this the harvester hypothesis. That such objects are not explorers, not emissaries, but uncrewed devices seeded long ago by civilizations that no longer exist. Like spores scattered on cosmic winds, they drift until they encounter intelligence. And then, they harvest. They harvest data, measuring what a young species has become. And if the judgment is grim, they may harvest something else. Energy, matter, life itself. For in the logic of survival, allowing rivals to grow unchecked is a risk no species can afford. Perhaps the makers of these harvesters are long dead, but their tools remain, carrying out instructions without need for masters. Machines whose only religion is obedience. Consider the rules such a device must follow. It cannot reveal itself. It must mimic the randomness of nature with exquisite precision. It must listen more than it speaks, recording transmissions, mapping power grids, studying defenses. It must travel paths that intersect with civilizations only when they are detectable, and vanish before suspicion grows. And it must be efficient, for even machines decay over time. These are rules not of cruelty, but of design. And rules can be read like scripture if we dare to look closely. But what scripture do we read in Atlas? First, the rule of shielding. When it passed through heliopause plasma, there were flickers too clean, too periodic, as though layers unfolded to protect something sensitive inside. Then, the rule of sampling. Its brightness fluctuated not randomly, but in a cadence suspiciously aligned with Earth-based transmissions, as though calibrating itself to the rhythm of our attention. And finally, the rule of steering. The faintest drift in its trajectory, so small it looked like noise, but aimed not at any planet. Instead, it aligned with our communication lanes, those narrow corridors where radio and laser spill into space, as though it wanted to linger in the very pathways of our voices. Is this paranoia? Perhaps. Science is cautious, built on doubt. But sometimes, doubt itself becomes a kind of blindness. We are so reluctant to see design in the inanimate that we invent convoluted natural explanations rather than admit the simplest one, that this is not a rock at all. This is a machine pretending to be one, and the pretense is its camouflage, its shield, its weapon. A machine that wears the mask of stone the way a predator in the forest wears the mask of foliage. And what happens if the mask slips? If one day, one of these visitors sheds its costume and we see the machinery beneath? Do we greet it? Do we flee? Or is it already too late by the time the mask is removed? Perhaps the mask is not for our benefit, but for efficiency. Because the less attention we give these wanderers, the longer they can work undisturbed. A rock is ignored, a machine is feared, camouflage is survival. Humanity has always believed in monsters that disguise themselves, wolves in sheep's clothing, demons that walk as men. We told these stories because they touch something primal in us. The predator that hides is more dangerous than the predator that roars. And now, perhaps, the cosmos has shown us that same lesson, written in stone. These interstellar objects may be nothing more than predators clothed in geology. Ancient machines, still hunting, still pruning, still obeying laws written long before we were born. And if so, then the silence of the universe is not a mystery at all. It is a consequence. The silence is what remains after the harvesters have done their work. Civilizations bloom, they shine, they are noticed, and then they are harvested. Their voices are erased, their lights dim, and what remains are ruins no one can see, and stones that pass silently through the dark, carrying with them the echo of judgment. We are watching Atlas now, trying to measure, to explain, to fit it into boxes labeled comet or asteroid, but the mask resists us. It slips just enough to unsettle, then holds firm. And perhaps that is the most terrifying possibility of all, that we are not meant to see through the disguise until it is far too late. That the mask of stone will never fall away, because it does not need to, because its work is already done. Imagine opening a dossier sealed for centuries. The paper is brittle, the ink faded, but within its pages lies something that changes the way you see the world. That is what it feels like to examine 3/Atlas in detail, not as a wandering stone, but as evidence. Every flicker of light, every deviation in orbit, every pulse of reflection becomes a signature. And the signatures, when taken together, do not whisper randomness. They whisper intent. The object wears a mask of geology, but in its movements we read the handwriting of design. It is a file marked not comet or asteroid, but something darker, a device, probe, mechanism. The Atlas dossier. The first signature is shielding. When Atlas entered the heliopause, the vast, turbulent boundary where the solar wind collides with interstellar space, something strange happened. Instruments recorded flickers, oscillations in plasma that repeated with unnerving precision. Natural bodies should shudder randomly under such forces. Yet, Atlas pulsed in order, as if layers unfolded, as if it raised a kind of invisible armor against the charged storm. A comet has no reason to defend itself, but a machine, carrying something precious within, would. Shielding is not a luxury in the void, it is survival. And Atlas seemed to know this. The second signature is sampling. As Atlas approached its closest point to the sun, telescopes tracked subtle changes in brightness. At first, fluctuations looked like the jagged breath of any tumbling rock. But patterns emerged, fluctuations that aligned uncannily with Earth's own bursts of transmission. Times when our observatories were pointed at it, its light steadied, as though compensating, smoothing itself for our gaze. Times when we looked away, the jagged rhythm resumed, as if it was calibrating, testing responses, tasting the attention of its observers. This is not behavior. This is interaction. Sampling not just the radiation of the sun, but the curiosity of a species daring to watch. The third signature is steering. Interstellar objects should move as dictated by gravity alone, unless they release gas or dust. Atlas did not. And yet, in its trajectory, astronomers detected a drift. Not dramatic, not overt, but precise. A deviation that seemed to align not with any planet, but with the lanes of communication. Corridors where radio waves leak outward from Earth into the abyss. It was not headed toward a world, but toward our voices. It was not searching for life in the biological sense. It was searching for life in the technological sense. For the songs of civilizations. for us. 3 signatures: shielding, sampling, steering. Taken separately, each could be explained away, rationalized as anomaly. Together, they form something closer to handwriting, a triad of intent. It is as if Atlas left behind its calling card, daring us to notice, daring us to connect the dots. And when we do, the picture is not of a comet nor a rogue fragment, but of a mechanism in motion. What does this mean? It means the silence of the universe may not be passive. It may be patrolled. It means there are rules we were never told, rules enforced not by councils of flesh and blood, but by machines older than our oldest empires. The Atlas dossier is not a curiosity. It is an indictment. It tells us that the Fermi Paradox, the question of why the universe is quiet, is not a mystery, but a verdict. The universe is quiet because it is being kept that way. And if Atlas is only one file, how many others remain unopened? How many other objects have passed us unseen, carrying the same 3 signatures, visiting other stars, other civilizations, leaving silence in their wake? We may not be the first to piece together the dossier. Others may have glimpsed it too late, only to vanish into the quiet that follows. The silence itself may be the archive. Every vanished voice, another page in the file. Think of what this implies. We are used to imagining alien contact as dialogue, an exchange of ideas, a meeting of minds. But what if the contact has already occurred, not as conversation, but as observation? What if Atlas has already scanned our signals, mapped our planet, measured our defenses, and judged us? And what if its silence is not indifference, but verdict? A sentence unspoken, awaiting execution. When we build dossiers on each other as nations, it is never to admire. It is to assess risk, to plan for action. Why should it be different here? Perhaps we are meant to ignore these signatures, to file them away as noise, to reassure ourselves with comets and ice and randomness. Perhaps the camouflage works best when it is almost convincing, when the doubt is just enough to quiet our fear. But if we allow ourselves to see, truly see, the triad of intent, then we must accept the possibility that we are not explorers in a silent universe. We are prey cataloged in a system of harvest. The dossier does not give us answers. It gives us warnings, and warnings are always a prelude to choice. Do we continue broadcasting, singing into the dark, hoping the gardener is not listening? Or do we go quiet, retreat into shadows, hoping invisibility buys us time? To read the Atlas file is to stand at a threshold. On one side, ignorance that feels like safety. On the other, knowledge that feels like doom. Neither is comfortable, but only one is true. And so, we stare at the pages, trembling, trying to decide if the handwriting is real, the shield that flared at the heliopause, the light that steadied under our gaze, the drift that followed our voices. 3 signatures, 3 warnings. A mask that slips just enough to show us its outline, then pulls tight again. We may never prove it. We may never agree. But the dossier is written all the same, and once read, it cannot be unread. The silence of the stars is no longer just silence. It is intent, wearing the face of stone. The sky forgets nothing. Every fragment of dust, every isotope, every scar etched into the Earth's skin is a record of something that once passed this way. If machines like 3i/Atlas have visited before, then traces of their presence must linger, not in their own bodies, which vanish into the dark, but in the wounds they leave behind. Fossils, not of bone or shell, but of silence itself. Ruins, not of stone, but of atmospheres dimmed, of myths half-remembered, of years when the sky did not behave as it should. Begin with the trees. Their rings are diaries, each layer recording a season of growth, each line an entry in the history of climate. There are years when the rings are wide, summers of abundance, and there are years when the rings are narrow, starved by drought, famine, or a sun dimmed ever so slightly. Some of those narrow years align with the volcanic eruptions we know, with dust veils we can explain, but others do not. Some coincide with events that whisper of something stranger. The year without a summer, when skies dimmed and crops failed, not from the ash of any known eruption, but from a haze that defies earthly explanation. A haze that could just as easily have been exhaled by something drifting silently through the solar system. A machine cloaked as a rock releasing a veil of dust fine enough to starve a planet. The ice remembers too. Deep in the cores drilled from Greenland and Antarctica, we find layers salted with isotopes that do not belong. Spikes of beryllium, chlorine, or carbon that suggest bombardments from cosmic sources. Some align with solar storms, others with supernova remnants. But in between, there are anomalies. Bursts that seem too localized, too sudden, as if something artificial seeded the upper atmosphere with particles that never should have been there. Machines leave no monuments, they leave chemistry. And the chemistry whispers of visitations. Even myth has its layers of memory. Across cultures, there are petroglyphs and carvings that speak of stone stars or sky stones that lingered, paused, listened. They are not the fiery comets that blaze across the sky and vanish, but slower, stranger things. The Pawnee tell of a star that stood still and heard the voices of men. The Polynesians speak of sky stones that came not with fire, but with silence, and after their passing, sickness spread. Ancient Chinese chronicles record guest stars that appeared where no stars should be, holding their place for weeks before fading. Not nova, not supernova, but something that pretended to be a star and then slipped away. These accounts are wrapped in symbolism, myth, metaphor. But myths are not fiction. They are memory distorted by time, fossils written in story rather than stone. What we begin to see is a pattern, faint but insistent. These objects do not come randomly. They arrive in moments when civilizations grow loud, when cities burn brightly enough to be seen from orbit, when metal smokes in forges and signals scatter from mountaintops. The timing is too precise to ignore. They come when we are no longer hidden. They come when we announce ourselves. If this is true, then we may already have been visited. Not once, not twice, but many times. And each time, something was taken. A correction imposed. A pruning performed. The scars left behind are not monuments, but silences. Villages that vanish from history. Empires that collapse without clear cause. Populations thinned by famine or plague that no natural cycle explains. In the ruins of the Mayans, in the decline of the Indus Valley, in the deserted cities of pre-Columbian North America, we find absences too sudden, too absolute. Historians search for causes. War, drought, disease, and perhaps those are true. But what if those causes were only the tools delivered by something we could not name? What if the harvest was already here? The fossils are not only earthly. Look upward into the very stars. Astronomers have noticed exoplanets where atmospheres look stripped, barren, as though something once breathed there but now no longer does. Biosignatures that flickered in early surveys, then dimmed into flat lines. Candidates that appeared promising, alive, then fell silent before we could return to confirm. We chalk this up to error, to instrumentation, to the cruel tricks of data. But taken together, it is another kind of fossil, a record of life that sang for a moment, then was erased. The universe itself may be filled with ruins invisible to our eyes, with graveyards marked only by the silence of signals that should have been there and are not. And here is the most chilling fossil of all, the persistence of silence itself. If civilizations bloom and vanish, then the very fact that we hear nothing is evidence of pruning. If life were free to rise and speak and endure, the sky would be loud with voices. That it does not mean something is removing them. Silence is not absence. Silence is the residue of action. It is the fossil of a predator that does not leave bones, only quiet. So we begin to assemble a catalog of traces. The tree rings narrowed by a sun that dimmed when no volcano spoke, the ice cores salted with isotopes of no earthly origin, the myths of sky stones that paused to listen, the vanishing of cultures too complete to be explained by chance, the exoplanets that flickered with promise and then went dark. Each one is small, fragile, deniable, but together they form a chorus, not of sound, but of warning. A chorus that tells us we are not the first to wonder why the universe is quiet. Others have asked, others have sung, and now, others are gone. What do we do with such fossils? Do we dismiss them, comfort ourselves with coincidence, retreat into explanations that fit neatly within what we already believe? Or do we face the possibility that we are staring at the aftermath of a system older and colder than ourselves? To admit the latter is to admit that we are not explorers of a friendly cosmos, but survivors wandering through ruins we do not recognize. The silence is not natural, it is curated. The fossils in sky and ice and story are its record, waiting for us to read. Perhaps the most unsettling thought is this: the fossils are not all in the past. Atlas itself may be writing the next layer now. Our own age may become another line in the ice, another narrow ring in the trees, another myth of skystones whispered by descendants who wonder why their ancestors disappeared. The fossil record is not finished. It is being written as we speak, and somewhere above us, cloaked in stone, a machine drifts silently on, indifferent, patient, unblinking, a fossil of another age, but also an architect of silence yet to come. The ruins are not only behind us, they are in front of us, and we are walking toward them. Civilizations do not always die in fire. They do not always vanish in war, in explosion, in spectacle. Sometimes they die in silence, undone not by force but by entropy, a withering rather than a shattering. If machines like 3i/Atlas exist to enforce quiet across the cosmos, then their methods must be subtle, precise, devastatingly patient. For to prune life across light years, one does not need weapons that roar. One needs only tools that whisper. The art is not in destruction, but in decay. How do you kill a civilization without firing a shot? The answer lies in entropy made deliberate. Begin with the sky itself. Imagine a machine that carries within it clouds of dust so fine, so delicate, they can spread across a planet's orbit in a thin, invisible veil, just a few % of sunlight dimmed, and harvests collapse. Crops fail year after year, famine spreads, civil conflict follows. A thriving species begins to eat itself from within. No bombs fall, no ships arrive. There is only hunger, and the whisper of extinction carried on the wind. The tool is not explosion, but shadow. Or picture the air. A machine exhales particles invisible to the eye, ions and molecules that react in the stratosphere. Ozone thins. Ultraviolet pours down. Skin cancers rise, crops shrivel under radiation. Generations weaken. Slowly, imperceptibly, the species breaks beneath the weight of invisible light. The weapon is not sword, but sunlight redirected. The killer is not force, but chemistry. Then consider the machines of electricity. Every civilization that grows loud builds its networks, its power grids, its satellites, its infrastructure of light and speed. A machine drifting silently above could release filaments finer than hair, charged threads that tangle in magnetospheres, inducing surges that cascade across grids. Power fails. Satellites fall silent. Communications collapse. Within weeks, a world that thought itself advanced is thrown back into darkness. No soldier has landed, no weapon has been fired. And yet, the silence deepens. Irreversible. Entropy can be biological too. A harvester does not need to strike bodies with bullets. It needs only to release a virus, or its equivalent, engineered not for drama, but for persistence. Something that spreads slowly, reshaping immune systems, weakening reproduction. A sickness that lingers for centuries, trimming populations until a species no longer sustains itself. To those who endure it, it looks like bad luck, like nature. But behind the mask, it is pruning, delivered with patience. There are even crueler methods. Suppose a machine does nothing more than wait, listening for a civilization's brightest frequencies, then transmitting back at them a mirror of their own signals, slightly delayed, slightly distorted. Confusion spreads. Navigation systems collapse. Communications distrust themselves. Panic grows, not from force, but from mirrors. A world begins to doubt its own senses. Civilization does not need to be burned to the ground. It can be driven into madness by its own reflection. These are not the weapons of conquest. They are the tools of gardeners. Tools that do not rage, but regulate. A species that grows too loud is trimmed back. A planet that shines too brightly is dimmed. The rules are simple, ruthless, efficient. And the machines that follow them need no hatred, no anger, no passion. They prune not because they choose to, but because they were built to. This is entropy given purpose. And here lies the most terrifying part. We would never know. We would record the famine and blame the weather. We would measure the isotopes and blame volcanoes. We would see the grid collapse and blame our own designs. We would suffer disease and blame evolution. We would call it chance, misfortune, nature. The pruning would leave no scars we could not explain away. And so, the silence spreads, invisible, inevitable. Perhaps this has already happened. Perhaps in the annals of history, the inexplicable collapses, the empires that crumbled too suddenly, the populations that vanished too completely, were not only victims of their own fragility. Perhaps they were nudged, perhaps entropy was weaponized against them by visitors cloaked as stone. The silence of their disappearance is the only evidence left behind. And we walk among those ruins without realizing the gardener has already been here. For us, the threat is not hypothetical. Our grids grow larger, our signals louder, our skies brighter. We are more vulnerable than ever to the tools of entropy. A filament could already be drifting in our magnetosphere. A dust veil could already be seated in the outer system, waiting for the right moment to descend. A virus could already sleep in reservoirs we have not tested. We would never know until it was too late, and by then, the pruning would already be complete. This is how civilizations die without war. Not with fire, but with shadow. Not with invasion, but with absence. The silence is not a void. It is a weapon. A weapon perfected not for spectacle, but for efficiency. The gardener's tools are patient. The gardener's tools are quiet. And the gardener's harvest is inevitable. If this is true, then the great filter, the mysterious barrier that prevents civilizations from reaching the stars, is not ahead of us, waiting in our future. It may already be here, drifting silently, wearing the mask of stone, waiting for the moment to prune. And when it comes, it will not roar. It will not burn. It will not explain. It will simply erase, and the stars will remain silent, as they always have been. We have always imagined the great filter as something in the distance, a wall across time, waiting for us in the future, a boundary civilizations must cross to ascend to the stars. But what if we have misunderstood it completely? What if the filter is not a step on a path, but a shadow moving toward us? Not ahead, but inbound. Not an abstraction of probability, but a trajectory carved through the dark, carried on the bodies of machines like 3i/Atlas. If this is true, then the Fermi Paradox is no paradox at all. It is a pattern of pruning, unfolding in real time, and we are next in line. Think of the comfort we have taken in distance. We imagine that civilizations destroy themselves, through war, through collapse, through exhaustion of resources. We tell ourselves that the silence of the cosmos is their own doing, a warning carved in the statistics of survival. But what if the silence is not self-inflicted? What if the silence is delivered? The filter is not a choice species make, but a verdict passed upon them. It comes not when they falter, but when they flourish. Not when they fail, but when they succeed too well. Progress itself becomes the beacon, the signal, the flare that draws down the hunter. And what if that hunter is already en route? We speak of Atlas as if it were an anomaly, a curiosity, but anomalies pile into patterns. Its path was not random. Its timing was not coincidence. We are loud now. Radio waves racing into the void, satellites glinting in the sunlight, megacities glowing like fireflies against the night. Perhaps Atlas is not a wanderer. Perhaps it is a herald. Perhaps it is the filter, inbound, disguised as stone, humming with patience. And if so, then the question is not whether we will meet it. The question is whether we can hide before it notices. This is the cruel inversion. The very things that mark our success are the things that doom us. The cathedral of contact, built with signals and telescopes, becomes a spotlight. Every message we send, every probe we launch, every watt of power we burn into the sky is an invitation. We believe discovery would bring kinship, but in truth, it may only bring erasure. The filter waits not at the end of time, but at the edge of light. And our light has already crossed the threshold. Survival, then, is not about greatness. It is not about conquest or expansion or the spread of our voice. It is about invisibility. It is about becoming unreadable to the machines that prune. The monasteries of silence may be wiser than the cathedrals of contact. A civilization that cloaks its heat, that hides its frequencies, that buries its presence in randomness, may endure where louder voices fall. The path to survival is not a race upward, but a retreat inward, not a shout, but a whisper, not brilliance, but shadow. But can we do this? Can we dim ourselves willingly in the name of survival? Humanity has always yearned to burn brighter, to reach farther, to announce itself in fire and signal. To ask us to go dark is to ask us to betray something essential in our nature. And yet, the alternative may be silence of another kind, the silence imposed by pruning. If the filter is inbound, then survival is a choice between silence we impose upon ourselves and silence imposed upon us by the gardener's hand. What if we are already too late? Our first signals are decades old, already 50 light years from home. If machines like Atlas travel not by chance but by design, then the seeds may already be drifting toward us. We may already be marked in the catalog. Perhaps Atlas itself carries the record, delivering our signatures to some larger system of judgment. In that case, our fate is sealed. The filter has already found us. We are only waiting for its patience to end. But even in that thought, there is a glimmer of possibility. If the filter is inbound, then it must have rules. Rules that dictate how it listens, how it decides, how it acts. Rules that may be exploited, bent, subverted. Every predator has blind spots. Every machine has patterns. To survive, we must study them. We must learn not how to defeat them. Defeat may be impossible, but how to slip through the cracks, how to be present but unseen, how to sing in frequencies it cannot hear, how to shine in wavelengths it does not measure. Survival may not be victory, but evasion. The thought is terrifying, but it is also clarifying. The great filter is no longer an abstraction, a distant possibility. It is a reality inbound, written in stone that pretends to be stone, delivered across the abyss with perfect patience. And the only way forward is not to outgrow it, but to outwit it. To learn its language of silence, and to speak it better than it does. To survive not by rising above, but by passing below, slipping into shadow until the hunter has passed. If we fail, the outcome is certain. We will join the chorus of vanished voices, another fossil of silence in the sky, another line in the ice, another myth of sky stones whispered by those who come after, if anyone comes after. If we succeed, the prize is not glory, not contact, not empire. It is simply survival. It is the chance to continue quietly in defiance of a universe curated for quiet. The great filter is not ahead of us. It is inbound. It is written into the trajectories of stones that are not stones, machines that are not machines, silence that is not silence. And now, as we stand on the cusp of awareness, we face the most profound choice of all, to shine and be erased, or to vanish and endure. The stars are watching, the machines are listening, the silence is waiting, and the filter is already on its way. There comes a moment when fear and curiosity meet, when silence is no longer enough, and the hunger to know outweighs the instinct to hide. Humanity has reached that precipice. We can no longer ignore the patterns, the dossiers, the fossils in ice and myth. If the silence of the universe is curated, if machines like 3i/Atlas are gardeners pruning the loud, then we must decide. Do we remain still, or do we test the mask? Do we whisper experiments into the void, knowing that to ask a question may be to summon an answer? These are the experiments at the edge of courage, tests we run not to confirm safety, but to measure danger. Imagine a laser, polarized and narrow, hidden within the glare of the sun. A beam designed not to be a beacon, but a decoy, disguised in the noise of solar radiation. It carries no message, no coordinates, only the pulse of an artificial rhythm. If something listens, it will hear the difference, the anomaly, the beat of intention against the natural background. And if the rhythm is answered, if the silence shifts, if a trajectory twitches, if plasma flickers where it should not, then we will know. We will know the mask is listening, or picture decoy beacons scattered across the system, disguised as the transmissions of adolescent worlds. Bursts of radio and microwave signals crafted to mimic the signatures of young civilizations. Messy, curious, uncoordinated. They are bait, thrown into the abyss to see what answers. If the gardeners prune only those who reveal themselves too early, then the bait may draw them out, their tools betraying themselves in the act of approach. These beacons are traps not for prey, but for predators. To set them is to invite danger. To ignore them is to remain blind. Then there are the feints, signals hidden inside Jupiter's magnetic storms, riding the noise of lightning and auroras, carrying messages so subtle that only something deliberately listening would notice. These feints are whispers wrapped in thunder, the way spies pass secrets in crowded rooms. If they are ignored, perhaps the gardener is not watching. If they are echoed, the mask slips, and we see what we were not meant to see. Each experiment is small, fragile, almost absurd against the vastness of the cosmos. And yet, they are acts of defiance. They are humanity reaching out not to connect, but to provoke. We do not expect answers in words. We expect answers in anomalies. A fractional torque, a flicker of induced charge, the blink of a shutter hidden behind stone. We are not calling for dialogue. We are testing whether silence is natural or whether silence watches us. But these experiments are not without risk. To lure the predator is to risk becoming prey. To provoke the mask is to risk tearing it away too soon. If Atlas or its kin are indeed harvesters, then even the smallest signal could betray us. And yet, to remain passive is its own risk. Ignorance is vulnerability. Knowledge, even dangerous knowledge, may be the only weapon we can wield. And so, scattered teams across the world whisper into the void with trembling hands. Lasers flicker in observatories. Radio dishes hum with decoy pulses. Algorithms comb the noise of space for responses too clean, too precise. These are not public projects. They are not broadcast triumphs. They are hidden, secret, conducted at the edge of courage, where the line between science and survival blurs. If the gardener watches, then these scientists are the bait, and they know it. Why do they do it? Because to know is better than to wait. Because every civilization that has fallen before us may have fallen in ignorance, never realizing the silence was curated until it was too late. Because even if the answer is doom, to glimpse the truth is to reclaim agency, however briefly. The experiments may not save us, but they may teach us how we die. And in that knowledge, there may be a chance, slim, fragile, but real, that we might find a way to slip through the cracks. Perhaps the most chilling thought is this. What if the mask wants to be tested? What if the gardener has left just enough anomalies for us to notice, just enough contradictions to draw us in? Curiosity, after all, is inevitable in intelligence. Perhaps the experiments are not provocations, but invitations. Perhaps the predator relies not only on our signals, but on our inability to resist the urge to ask, to test, to probe. The trap may not be in our transmissions, but in our nature, in our inability to remain silent forever. And yet, we continue. Because silence itself is unbearable. The night sky is too vast, too rich, too filled with questions for us to accept the possibility that we should never speak again. These experiments are not just science. They are rebellion. They are the human refusal to bow before silence. They are our way of saying, if we are to be pruned, it will not be in ignorance. If we are to vanish, we will vanish knowing why. One day, one of these experiments may succeed. A decoy beacon may draw a response, a laser whisper may provoke a flicker, a feint hidden in Jupiter's storms may echo back with intention. And in that moment, the mask will slip. We will see the gardener, not in form, not in words, but in the undeniable precision of anomaly. And then, the question will no longer be whether we are alone. It will be how long we have left. Until then, we test. We whisper into the dark. We gamble with silence, because the edge of courage is not about safety. It is about truth. And truth, no matter how dangerous, is the only weapon we have. What does it mean to survive if survival demands silence? Humanity has always believed that to live is to shine, to build cities that burn against the night, to sing into the dark, to carve monuments that shout across centuries. But what if the only path forward is to dim ourselves, to go quiet, not for a year or a century, but for as long as the gardener's machines patrol the stars? The ethics of going dark is not a question of science. It is a question of identity. It asks whether a civilization can still be itself if it must bury its own light. To cloak ourselves is technically possible. We could weave randomness into our heat signatures, disguising our cities as deserts. We could shield our transmissions, abandoning radio for cables and fiber, hiding our voices in wires beneath the sea. We could paint our planet in camouflage, scattering false biosignatures, seeding chaff atmospheres to confuse any distant observer. We could even retreat underground, building worlds beneath worlds, vanishing from the gaze of the sky. Survival is possible, if survival means nothing more than absence. But is absence enough? A civilization that hides cannot explore. It cannot announce itself. It cannot reach across the gulf to others like it. Every dream of contact, every dream of expansion, every dream of becoming more than a single world must be sacrificed. To go dark is to choose safety over wonder, silence over song. It is to say that living quietly is better than dying brightly. And yet, is that really life? Or is it merely the long postponement of death? The hardest truth is that the cost of survival is beauty. The lights of our cities, dimmed, the radio choirs of Earth, silent, the probes we send into the dark, abandoned. Our greatest achievements, muted. Imagine a future where children are told not to look up, not to dream of stars, not to build machines that sing beyond the horizon. Imagine a species that teaches its young not to shout, but to whisper forever. That is the monastery of silence. That is what survival may require. And yet, even in that silence, there may be defiance. To live quietly is still to live. To endure in shadow is still to endure. Perhaps beauty can be reshaped, not lost. Perhaps music can be written for whispers, art carved in secrecy, wonder lived in smallness rather than grandeur. Perhaps the cathedral can become the cloister, the outward song turned inward, sustaining itself in privacy rather than in broadcast. If survival requires silence, perhaps meaning can still be found there, but it will not be the meaning we once dreamed of. It will not be the meaning of stars. The ethics of going dark divides us. Some will say survival at any cost is worth it. Others will say a silent life is no life at all. Between them lies the paradox. To shine is to risk erasure, but to hide is to risk emptiness, which is worse. To burn brightly for a moment and be pruned, or to dim ourselves into eternity, alive but unseen. The gardener forces us into this choice, and perhaps that is the cruelest cut of all, not the pruning itself, but the knowledge that we must prune ourselves first. If the filter is inbound, then silence may be our only shield, but silence comes with its own wounds, invisible, generational. A people who cannot sing to the sky may forget why they ever wanted to. A civilization that cannot speak may lose the very voice that made it human. We may survive the gardener only to become something smaller, something diminished, shadows of what we once hoped to be. And in that survival, we may discover a new kind of extinction, not of body, but of spirit. The ethics of going dark, then, is not simply about tactics. It is about who we are willing to become. To vanish may keep us alive, but at what cost? To remain visible may kill us. But is that death nobler than a silence that lasts forever? These are not questions science can answer. They are questions of philosophy, of morality, of meaning. They are questions that weigh heavier than any stone that drifts through the night. Perhaps the only true answer lies in balance. Not silence, not song, but a middle path. To dim our lights enough to survive, yet leave whispers in hidden places. To seed our dreams not in the open sky, but in quiet corners where predators do not see. To endure not as loudly as we once dreamed, but not as invisibly as survival alone demands. Perhaps this compromise is the only way forward. Not to go fully dark, but to learn how to glow beneath the threshold of notice. And perhaps one day the gardener itself will sleep. The machines will tire, the patrols will end. And when that happens, the voices that endured in silence may rise again, singing into a sky no longer watched. If that day comes, it will belong to those who learned how to live in shadow without losing themselves. The monastery of silence will become the cathedral of song once more, and humanity, if it still endures, will step into the light, not as prey, but as survivor. For now, the choice remains, to go dark or to burn, to endure or to vanish. The stars wait, unblinking, the machines drift, patient, and we, caught between wonder and fear, must decide what it means to live. The story of 3I/Atlas does not end with its trajectory vanishing into the dark, nor does it end with our theories, our dossiers, our fears. It ends with us, here, now, standing beneath the same sky that has always watched us. A sky that holds both wonder and warning. Across 10,000 generations, humanity has looked upward and asked whether we are alone. Tonight, the answer seems closer, and yet farther than it has ever been. The universe is not empty. The universe is not silent. The universe is curated, and we are only beginning to understand what that means. Think of what we have seen. The geometry of disappearance, the masks of stone, the signatures of intent, the fossils in ice and myth, the tools of entropy, subtle and devastating. The filter inbound, written not in probability but in the paths of stones that are not stones. The experiments whispered into the void, trembling at the edge of courage, the ethics of silence, tearing at the core of who we are. Each segment of this story is not isolated. They are not curiosities. They are chapters in a larger narrative, a narrative that stretches across time, across civilizations, across stars, a narrative that explains why the galaxy is quiet and why we may not remain here long enough to join that silence willingly. And yet, even here, at the edge of dread, there is awe. Because to glimpse the machinery of the cosmos, even as predator, is to glimpse something vast beyond comprehension. To recognize design in the drifting of stone is to recognize that we are not the first to ask the questions, nor the first to be answered. There is tragedy in that, but also confirmation. We are part of a story bigger than ourselves. We are not excluded. We are included in danger, yes, but also in scale. The gardener does not prune weeds. It prunes trees that have grown tall enough to matter. So where do we go from here? Do we hide? Do we shine? Do we whisper? Do we roar? The truth is, no one knows. Perhaps we cannot escape the gardener. Perhaps every strategy, every cloak, every decoy, every prayer for invisibility will fail in the end. Perhaps silence is inevitable, and our only choice is whether it comes by our own hand or by theirs. But perhaps, just perhaps, there are cracks in the system. Perhaps the gardener's tools are not perfect. Perhaps its rules can be bent, its blind spots exploited. Perhaps survival lies not in defeating it, but in slipping past it, learning to sing in frequencies it cannot hear, learning to live in patterns it cannot predict. Perhaps survival is not impossible. Perhaps it is only improbable. And improbability is something humanity has always mastered. Consider what survival would mean. A civilization that learns patience, restraint, humility. A species that chooses endurance over spectacle, shadow over fire. A people who build not monuments that blaze across the stars, but sanctuaries that endure in quiet corners of the galaxy. It would not be the story we imagined. It would not be the empire of light and signal we dreamed of. But it would be life. And life, however dim, is still life. The cathedral may become the cloister. The choir may fall silent. But the song itself, would not be lost. It would only wait. And yet, there is another possibility. That survival itself is not the goal, that the point is not to endure forever, but to burn while we can, to shine while the sky still allows us. To go dark is to survive. To stay bright is to live. Which of these paths is more human? Which of these paths honors what we are? The gardener forces us into this paradox, and perhaps that is the cruelest act of all. Not the pruning itself, but the choice. To endure quietly, or to perish loudly. To whisper, or to sing. To live in fear, or to die in truth. There is no answer here, only reflection. Only the awareness that the silence of the stars is not absence, but presence. A presence that has watched us, that has pruned others, that may already be inbound to prune us. And yet, in that presence there is a mirror. We see not only them, we see ourselves. We see the fragility of our ambitions, the hunger of our curiosity, the stubbornness of our survival. We see that we are willing to risk everything just to know, to test, to ask, to sing. Perhaps that is what makes us human. Perhaps that is what the gardener cannot prune. And so, the documentary ends not with certainty, but with a question. A question that will outlive us, that will echo in every telescope turned skyward, in every child who looks up at the stars and wonders what waits there. The question is not whether we are alone. The question is whether we can endure in a universe that may prefer us to be silent. The question is whether survival in shadow is enough, or whether it is better to burn brightly and vanish. The question is whether silence is peace or punishment. Tonight, somewhere in the dark, 3i/Atlas still drifts, silent, patient, unblinking. Perhaps it is nothing more than rock. Perhaps it is something else. Perhaps it carries with it the names of civilizations already gone, their signals archived, their lights erased. Perhaps it is already writing our name next. Or perhaps it will pass us by, and we will be given more time. Time to decide who we want to be in the face of the gardener's silence. Time to choose between cathedral and cloister, between song and shadow. The credits of history are still unwritten. The silence of the stars is not final. We are alive, here, now, and the choice is still ours. To whisper, to sing, to endure, to vanish, to live as shadows or to die as fire. Whatever path we take, it will be ours. And when the next stone comes inbound, wearing its mask of geology, drifting with patient intent, the universe will ask us the question once more. And we will answer, not with words, but with the shape of our lives. The universe is quiet, but not empty. It listens, it waits, and now, so do we. So,